welcome and welcome to our webinar on actually the biggest change to legal education that no one is talking about. And we're talking about the next generation bar. I'm Katie Merrill. I'm the Dean of Admissions, coming live from Vermont, where we're due to get how many feet of snow?
I mean, up near me, it looks like about 2 feet.
Yeah, 2 feet of snow. I think, what do they say? March comes in like a lion and leaves like a lamb. I think it might be a little bit reversed this year. So welcome everyone. If you want to pop in where you're from and a word that describes you, that would be terrific. And with that, oh, hi Sarah. I've been to Allentown. Intense. Okay, good. I love all the inquisitive, intense. If you guys can put a more in, this is like you need intensity to be successful in passing the bar. But with that, I'm going to pass the floor to our law dean, Dean McCormick.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad to be with you today. I am joining you from South Royalton, Vermont, which you see here pictured on this first slide, although it doesn't look quite so green today. It is really my pleasure to talk with you about the next generation bar exam. I'm going to get started by just giving you a little bit of my background, and I'll start with July 2001. So quite a while ago, I took the bar exam for the first time after graduating from law school at Boston University School of Law. And right before I was about to begin practice as a civil litigator at a law firm in Boston. And I really found the bar exam to be one of the most intense experiences of my professional life. And it was definitely a moment that I did not feel confident or comfortable going into it. And the pressure that I felt was magnified by the fact that I had a job already and that I risked losing the job if I wasn't successful on the first time. So back then in 2001 became my journey of really becoming a student of the bar exam. So I was successful on that bar exam. I practiced law for about 10 years before I moved to Vermont and joined the faculty of Vermont Law School at Vermont Law and Graduate School. And ever since I got here, I have been really interested in the bar exam and really interested in helping students succeed the first time on the bar exam. As most of you know, it is an absolute gateway to the legal profession. You cannot practice law unless you are admitted to a bar exam. And the bar exam has changed a little bit over the years since I had my experience taking it. In particular, now we have something called the uniform bar exam that allows students to take the bar exam in one state. And then if they get a high enough score for the other state, to transfer their score to the other state, which is a huge benefit to students that was not around when I took the Massachusetts bar exam. But really, the bar exam, other than a few changes like that, the bar exam has been the same since when I took it in 2001 and even well before that. And very quietly, almost, the uniform or the National Conference on Bar Examiners, also known as the NCBE, announced that they were going to change the bar exam to the next generation bar exam. And I want to talk with you a little bit about that exam today, how it's different, what it says maybe on legal education, and how it's important for you to think about, because most of you, if not all of you, will be taking the next generation bar exam. So I want to give you a little bit of information about it, and then I'll save some time that I can answer your questions or we can have a discussion about it. I say it's the biggest change to legal education that no one is talking about is because really the way that all American law schools set up their curriculum is geared towards the bar exam that's been in existence since I took it and beyond. So the courses that you take really at any American law school in the first year are the same courses I took as a first-year student in 1998, and well before that as well. And so now really the content of the bar exam is changing, as well as the types of questions and the types of things that are tested on the bar exam. And so you have to conclude from that curriculum at law schools can or should change as well. And so I want to also talk to you a little bit about the curricular changes we've made that are debuting next year to respond to that. So my agenda for you today is to talk a little bit about what the exam is today, so you can better compare it to the exam that you're going to have. Talk a little bit about the challenges of the bar exam today. And then I want to preview for you what the next generation bar exam is and tell you what I think is the good news about it and the bad news about it. And as I mentioned, there'll be plenty of time for questions and discussion. All right, so this is what the bar exam is today. So this is typically, for most students, will be a 2-day, 16-hour exam. So the first day, you will spend the entire day on 200 multiple choice questions. This is an entirely closed book exam as well. No books, no notes, no outlines allowed. Just a pencil and your brain allowed for this exam. And the first day in most states is, it's different in various states, but one of the days is 200 multiple choice questions. This is called the MBE, the multi-state bar exam. And these questions cover contracts, property, torts, criminal law, civil procedure, constitutional law, and evidence. Your typical first year classes, although many schools, including us, offer evidence in the second year. By the way, I teach civil procedure both in our residential program and in our online learning program. So that's my area of expertise. The second day is a combination of 6 30-minute essays, and it's the subjects that are on the multiple choice part, as well as some additional subjects: business associations, conflict of laws, family laws, trust and estates, secured transactions. And then the other half of the day is 2 90-minute performance tests. So you'll get a sort of file with some facts and maybe some cases to read, and you'll have 90 minutes to read and absorb the file and then perform the task. Sometimes the task is to write a memo. Sometimes the task is to write a letter on a certain subject evaluating a legal claim. Sometimes the task is to write an opening statement or a closing statement, or even part of a persuasive brief. And these 3 components make up the bar exam. The passing score for these 3 parts varies from state to state. In Vermont, the passing score is 270. In New York, it's 266. The highest it is 270. And the lowest it is 260. As I said, this is a completely closed book exam. And so what you can immediately tell is if you have to know all of these subjects over here for the multiple choice, plus all of these subjects over here for the essay part, that's a lot of memorization, a lot of memorization. And that was, for me, the biggest challenge in preparing for the bar exam, was to try to keep so much information on so many different subjects in my head to be able to successfully answer the questions. I had a suspicion already, but what I immediately learned when I began practicing law was that you really don't need to memorize anything at all in the law. And in fact, it would be irresponsible to try to answer a client's question or prepare for a trial based on your memory of what the law is. You would always want to look it up, make sure you have the most relevant law. You can always use notes at oral arguments and at trials and other hearings. Your written documents that you prepare, I was a civil litigator, do not need to be done by memorization. And so really what was the most challenging and stressful part of the bar exam for me was not at all related to what I actually did as a practicing lawyer when I passed the exam and became an attorney. And my experience isn't unique. I think every attorney you talk to will say the same thing, that there's really no place for memorization in the actual practice of law. This part of the bar exam, this multi-state performance test, is not something that is one of the changes that was made since I took the bar exam in 2001. And most states have this as part of their exam, but this part is awesome. So this part I really do like, because it requires you not to memorize anything, but to actually perform a certain skill based on your synthesis of the facts of a particular case and the research in a particular case. So this part, this multi-state performance test, does really parallel what you do as a practicing attorney. The one thing that's different is you're not normally as time pressured. So this part of the exam is also really a time pressured exam. You have to do a lot of things in 90 minutes. So that part is a little artificial, well, very artificial, because you don't normally have time limits on what you need to do. At the same time, as an attorney, you're always striving to be as quick as you can to keep your clients' bills down, to be efficient. And that's what, as a young attorney, can really distinguish you at a law firm and make you more successful, is your efficiency in completing tasks. So it's related, although artificial in some ways. So this is today's exam. This is the exam that's still being offered. The bar exams generally is offered twice a year, in February and in July. most students graduate in May and then they take the bar exam in July. If they're unsuccessful, they have to wait till February before they can take the exam again. Another bad thing about the current bar exam is that it takes many, many months before you find out your results. So most of you will sit for that exam in July, and you might not find out your results till November. So not only can that be a stressful waiting period, but it also can hinder your ability to get a job if you haven't gone into the exam securing employment already, because many firms or other places that hire lawyers may not want to hire you until they know that you've passed the bar exam and been sworn in. So that length of time can leave you out of the workforce for a long period of time. So that's not good. All right, the new exam. So what happened was the NCBE did a lot of research to figure out what they should do and what skills should be tested on the new bar exam. It was really a 5-year process. And again, despite all the effort that went into this, it's not something that you hear law schools talking a lot about, even though it is such a major change. So the new exam, and this is a quotation from Judy, pardon me. The new exam was designed to balance the skills and knowledge needed in litigation and transactional legal practice. And the exam will reflect key changes that law schools are making and builds on successes of clinical legal writing and ADR programs. And if you don't know, ADR refers to alternative dispute resolution programs like mediation, negotiation, settlement, arbitration. The NCBE president, Judith Gunderson, said, stakeholders have indicated that the bar exam should test fewer subjects in order to focus on testing more lawyering skills. So those were the overall principles that influenced the development of the next generation bar exam. And believe it or not, it's debuting in summer of 2026. So July 2026 will be the first administration of the next generation bar exam. And so if you're part of the incoming class of 2024, you'll be 1 year past the next generation bar exam's debut when you take the bar exam for the first time. Might be different if you're an extended student, an online student, or an accelerated JD student. Although each jurisdiction has to adopt the next generation bar exam. And here's a little list of where we are right now with the jurisdictions that have adopted it. So the ones that are offering it in July 2026, Connecticut, well, you can read the list. You'll see Vermont is in July 2027 is when Vermont will be adopting the next generation bar exam. So it'll be the old exam up until July 2027. And then a few states have identified July 2028 as when they're adopting it. So for a while, the NCBE will be offering 2 exams, the old exam and the new exam. But then at some point, probably after July 2028, the NCBE will not offer the old exam anymore and will only offer the new exam. You might be looking at this list and thinking about where you want to practice. And I'm here to tell you that our students here at Vermont Law School generally take the bar in 35 different jurisdictions. So our students go all over the place. It is not the case that students that go here necessarily take the Vermont bar, but I wanted to identify us as one of the earlier adopters of the next generation bar exam, the state of Vermont. Usually it's each state's Supreme Court that decides things relative to bar passage and bar licensure. So many more states have not adopted it yet, but I'm sure that they will, because they will have to, because if they don't, they're going to be responsible for writing their own bar exam, because right now everyone uses the NCBE bar exam. Not everyone, but almost everyone. Everyone uses the multiple choice questions at least. Some states have a different second day. All right, so let's talk about how the new exam is different. I gave you that big list of subjects that's tested on the old exam. There's only 8 subjects tested on the new exam. Business associations, civil procedure, constitutional law, contracts, criminal law, evidence, torts, and property. So there's been a number of topics that have come off testing at all. So students will only be responsible for these 8 subjects, which is great news. In addition, within each subject, the scope of coverage has reduced. So for example, I told you I teach civil procedure. Up until next year, civil procedure has always been offered in 2 semesters, civil procedure 1 and civil procedure 2. And only doing that allowed us to cover the scope of coverage that is on the current bar exam. That coverage has reduced. So now we've combined civil procedure 1 and civil procedure 2 into a 1 semester 4 credit class. So that's what you're going to be having when you come here. Even better, the next generation bar exam tests these skills: legal research, legal writing, issue spotting and analysis, investigation and evaluation, client counseling and advising, negotiation and dispute resolution, and client relationship and management. And these are the skills that you actually need to be a successful attorney. And these are the skills that I needed in order to succeed at my law firm when I was practicing law. And these were the skills that I really felt like I got the least experience with in law school. And there was such a focus on all of those different topics and memorizing, especially in preparing for the bar exam, and less focus on these skills, which were the ones that I actually needed as an attorney. And so I'm so thrilled that the next generation bar exam is going to be focusing on these important skills. So here are some things that I love about the next generation bar exam: that it's a greater emphasis on lawyering skills, that it integrates knowledge and skills. And I'm going to show you some examples of the old question versus the new question. That it focuses on minimal context competence for entry-level practice, that it is a shortened time between administration and results. So the NCBE has reported that they're really trying to reduce that waiting time that I told you about between when you take the exam and when you get your results. There's going to be shorter fact patterns with fewer characters in the fact patterns. So in that way, it's going to allow you fewer tricks, I think. Reduced emphasis on memorization, which is great because, again, no memorization really needed in the practice of law. The old exam was 80% memorization and only 20% that practical test I told you about. The new exam is still requiring some memorization, but only about 40%. So about half of the exam will be memorization. Reduced time pressure. And so the bar exam of the old days, it was really a test on self-discipline in the exam moment. And very few, if any, students finished on time. Most would be rushing towards the end or leave some questions unanswered because of the intense time pressure. The new exam should involve less time pressure. The other thing that I really like about the next generation bar exam that's very specific to Vermont Law School is that I believe that our curriculum already had an in-depth focus on experiential learning and legal writing. And I think that those two skills are really the fundamental skills that I think are going to be necessary for the next generation bar exam. If you don't know what I mean by experiential learning, I mean all students have to take 6 credits of experiential learning to graduate from an ABA accredited law school. And a lot of times, most schools offer that through simulation type classes like trial advocacy. We have those simulation type classes, but we require our 6 credits of experiential learning to be through live client interaction. So we have 11 different legal clinics that you can participate in: environmental advocacy clinic, legislation and regulation, or farm to animal advocacy clinic, South Royalton Legal Clinic, which does veterans' rights, general practice, and family law. And there's a million more that I'm not mentioning right now. Environmental justice clinic, energy clinic. So you could participate in one of those clinics to fulfill that experiential requirement, or you could participate in an externship whereby you go off campus to any state, really, maybe work at a DA's office or a law firm or a nonprofit. You work under the supervision of an attorney, and then you have a professor supervisor as well back on campus, and you earn credit for that work. So those are the 2 ways that students complete. Many students do both. And it's a real commitment we have to live client interaction and experiential learning that I think makes us in a good position to prepare our students on these skills. Because as you can see from the skills here, you get all that experience when you have a live client interaction, or you get much of that experience. So I'm really happy about that. We also really focus on legal writing and research here. Many schools do. I think we're the only law school that I'm aware of that requires 3 semesters of legal writing rather than just 2. And so I think that extra emphasis on written communication and research will also put our students in the best position to succeed on the next generation bar exam. Here's what I don't love. Even though it's students in the building are going to be taking the next generation bar exam, there are a few questions released yet from the NCBE. So it's a little hard to start preparing, although that hasn't stopped our efforts to do so. There's also, it also can be difficult to measure some of those skills that I just showed you in an objective test. And so that has me worried about how the test will be graded and also students' perception of the fairness of the test. And for a while, both exams will be offered. And so that presents some complication for any law school in making sure that their students are prepared for both exams during that time period until the old exam sunsets. What have we done as a school to prepare for the next generation bar exam? So one is I have just become an absolute student of this exam, attending every training session, every information session possible. The other thing is I made sure that our school was a bar exam research law school. So the next generation the National Conference on Bar Examiners was looking for schools to host field tests where they gave prototypes of the exam to a set of students to test out the questions. And so we eagerly signed up for that. There was about 100 confidentiality agreements we had to sign because they don't want us releasing these questions, these prototype questions that might end up on the actual bar exam someday. But they did allow us to conduct a focus group with our students after the exam and to hear what they had to say about it. And some of the things, so we just did this in January, and some of the things that my students said about this exam confirmed my excitement for the test. So they said that it was more practical, that it was more useful. They didn't feel as deceived. And some of these students had taken the bar exam already. Some were recent grads. Some have not taken it yet, but have done enough practice tests to know what the exam is like. They felt less time pressure, and they thought that it built upon the experience that they had in their clinics and in their externships in a way that they felt more prepared for the exam. So that was really the very positive feedback I got from conducting those focus groups. Some negative feedback I got was that piece about the answers perhaps being subjective. And then the second negative piece of feedback I got was about the interface of the exam. The system that they were using was cumbersome for them to work with. For example, it had character limits rather than word limits and other things that they weren't used to. So those were the two pieces of criticism I got about the exam, which is encouraging because that really confirms for me that not only will our students be prepared because of that focus on experiential and legal writing, but that it is an actual useful exam as instead of sort of a rite of passage that bears no relation to the practice of law. I wanted to show you just so you could get a feel for it on your own if you haven't seen them at all, the difference. So this what I'm showing you right now is a traditional old bar exam style question. And again, closed book. So just take a moment to read that. And then I'm going to show you what a different question is going to look like on the next generation bar exam. So this question is testing one subject of that list I showed you on that yellow slide, evidence. So this is testing evidence, and it's asking you to identify what the issue is. So that issue spotting piece is still in here. And it's asking you to be able to recall by memory what the rule is on admissibility of this type of evidence. So you would need to have memorized the rule to be able to answer this question correctly and understand how to apply it. If you saw something like this on an essay, you would have to be able to recall the rule and write it down to answer the essay question. It tests one subject, and it's really just memorization of a rule and how to apply it that you need to know to be successful on this type of question. This is what a more next generation bar, this is one of the sample questions that NCBE has released about the next gen bar. This is more of what you're going to see on the new exam. So take a moment to read this. So as you can probably see from this question, so the last question I had to be able to recall a rule and apply it, right? And again, not very related to the practice of law because I can always look up what the rule is as a lawyer. I need to know enough to be able to issue spot it, but I can always look up what the law is on admissibility of that type of evidence if I didn't know it offhand. Here in this type of question, I'm really doing the skills that a lawyer has to do where they issue spot. And that's the only thing that this question is testing. So you need to know enough about these legal principles, consent searches, exigent circumstances, hot pursuit, probable cause. You need to know enough about them to be able to issue spot, but you don't need to recall the rule or restate the rule by memory as you would need to do in the last question. And it's just much more practical. And it's really, this is exactly what you would do. You would meet with a client, you would get the facts from a client, and then you would say, what are the possible issues that I have? And so then you would sort of generate, brainstorm ideas. Then maybe you go research to see if they actually are going to work for your client or not. And you read some cases and you kind of figure it out from there. So this is a much more practical question that much more closely mirrors what an attorney is actually going to do. And so for that reason, I love it. The other thing that the new exam does, and I think this part will present some challenges, but it's for the best, is that the exams will cover more than one subject, right? So on the old bar exam, you had, I told you, 200 multiple choice questions, and 25 of them are from civil procedure, 25 were from con law, 25 were from evidence, et cetera, and so on and so forth. But it's not like a client comes into you and says, I have a civil procedure problem, or I have an evidence problem, or even a constitutional law problem. And it's not often that your client's issues will only involve one of those subjects, right? There's often many different subjects that are involved in resolving a client's difficulty. And so the new exam will have question sets that cover more than one subject matter, which again is much more like what you're going to actually do as an attorney. And that's really a description of the next generation bar exam and why I'm so excited about it. And now I would really like to invite you to ask any questions that you have about the exam or anything about Vermont Law School as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
And everyone, if you want, you can either unmute, go off video, ask in the chat. We're happy to see you and also happy to have you ask questions. Dean McCormick, I'm itching to know the answers to the 2 bar questions.
No, I don't know. I don't know the answers because I'm not my expertise is in civil procedure, but that's a good point. Next time I will come in knowing those answers.
Oh, Sarah Henry's like, me too. We're like, which one is it? Oh goodness.
I have a suspicion, but I don't have to know evidence law by heart anymore, right? I have to look, I can look it up and find the answers in a reasonable amount of time, which is all as an attorney. And I'm not an attorney anymore. Now I'm an educator. Both jobs have been great though.
I was curious. What factors do you think make a student successful in passing the bar?
Yeah, so maybe my answer is going to change based on as I learn more about the next generation bar exam. But right now, I think it is a student who is disciplined. We tell students it takes 600 hours of focused study to succeed on the bar exam. And most students who do that do pass on the first time. But it is hard to sometimes sustain that kind of focused commitment over a long period of time, especially in areas that maybe you're not interested in, that you're not going to practice in. For example, for me, property was the hardest part for me in the bar exam. It was my hardest subject in law school. I never had any intention to practice law in that area of law. So studying for it I had to force myself to do it. Whereas evidence, or constitutional law, I was very good at, and I could get those answers right. And so I was much more likely my temptation was to always do those questions instead. So it takes a certain amount of discipline to succeed. I think it also takes a focus during law school. You can't expect to learn everything you need to do to pass the bar exam in the 10 weeks between when you graduate. And so I think students that choose their curriculum based on their strengths and weaknesses on the bar exam or what they think their strengths and weaknesses will be tend to be more successful. And I also think that my students that do a lot of experiential learning, which so many of the students here do tend to have a benefit as well.
Thank you. We have some go-getters. They looked up ANF.
ANF, how good.
Thanks, Jeff. I see that you went off camera. Sarah, do you have any questions for Dean McCormick as I put you on the spot? Are you excited and nervous about the bar? I do have another question while everyone might be thinking of something. LSATs and how they relate to the bar. What are your thoughts on how the LSAT relates to the bar exam now, and how you feel it's going to go, the next generation of LSAT?
Yeah. So that's a great question. It's one I've been thinking about quite a bit. Right now, the correlation between LSAT is very strong with the correlation between first year law school grades. So people think that it's a direct predictor of bar passage, and it's actually an indirect predictor of bar passage. So LSAT right now, it's been very well studied, correlates very well with predicting what first year 1L grades are. And then 1L grades are a very strong predictor of bar passage success. So it's an indirect correlation. And as I said, it's been well studied, and we have studied it as well within our own data, and find it to be very well correlated as well. So for example, our data suggests if you earn a 2.67 in your first year or below, you have about an 11% chance of passing the bar exam. But if you earn higher than a 2.67, you have about an 80 whatever percent chance of passing the bar exam. So it's also very well correlated in our own data as well as national. I don't know how the next generation bar exam will correlate with LSAT score or first year grades. So I don't know whether that same data will be able to be relied on for the new exam. The new exam does contain some of the old components. Some MBE type questions, like I showed you, will still be on the new exam, but again, that's 40% down from 80%. So it's hard to say right now, and I don't think anyone really knows. And because the national conference has released so few questions on it, it's just very hard to predict. We still know that the LSAT will do a good job at predicting first year grades, though, so it's still a valuable tool for us. And I should add that once we kind of learned about that correlation, we did a number of things to support that at-risk group. In terms of after the first semester, we provide all sorts of mentorship and support for students that are in that kind of at-risk GPA from the first year. And of course, like any type of data, there's exceptions all over the place. And I can tell you many wonderful stories of low LSATed students that have passed the bar successfully on the first time, including, gotten among the highest scores in some jurisdictions. So data can only do so much.
I know you have some ideas of what makes a student not successful on a bar. Can you talk a little bit about maybe one of your favorites?
No weddings and no babies during bar preparation summer. So that's what I always tell students as soon as they get here. So that is an intense 10-week period where we would tell you that you need to be studying 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And so that is a full-time job. And so students that kind of plan to move during that time period, or to get married, or to have a baby during that time period, that can sometimes really derail that study preparation period. Our president, Rod Smola, he just actually spoke to students about the bar yesterday, and he said it this way, which I liked, right? It is not always true that the amount of work you put into something pays off. Right. So I can work so hard to represent a client, they could still be found guilty. Right. It is not always true. Maybe sometimes you've worked so hard to prepare for a paper or whatever, and it doesn't always pay off that you get what you want. But in terms of bar preparation, it does tend to pay off. If you put the time in, you tend to pass the first time. There are some exceptions. There are people that have exam anxiety. But if you study for it, you tend to, that tends to pay off. And I think our number is around 80%. If you complete 80% of your bar preparation course, our students tend to pass the exam on the first time. So, so you really need to be focused. You need to plan ahead for it, get your family support, prepare financially. You really can't be working. I told you studying for the bar is your full-time job that summer. So that is one of the things that I see. Another thing I see that I think is a waste of time and money is sometimes I see students saying, well, I'm not really going to study for it, but I'm going to just take it to try it out and see what it's like, and then take it again in February. And that to me is just a complete waste of time and money. You want to pass the first time, and then you want it to be behind you. So those are the two things that I can point to.
Can you talk a little bit about what we have in place at Vermont Law and Graduate School to ensure success and participation in the bar?
Yes, I certainly can. And one of the things in particular that I'm very proud of is just last year we instituted a new partnership with Barbary. So Barbary is one of the main test preparation companies for the bar exam. In fact, that's the company that's the class I took when I took it back in 2001. So they've been around the longest. And we ended up in a partnership with them. One of the problems we had seen, right, is because even after, at least with the old bar exam, even after you've gone through 3 years of law school and taken all these classes, we still expect you, and this is true for any American law school, to take a bar preparation class during that 10 weeks between when the exam, when you graduate and when the exam starts. And those classes can be $3,000. Some of them are less, depending on which one you choose. And of course, many of you will not have $3,000 to spend on a class like that after you have finished being 3 years as a student. And what we were seeing was a lot of people were not taking that class, even though it really is critical to passing for any student anywhere. Every student takes this class to prepare for the bar exam. So what we did was we partnered with Barbary and we made the class part of your tuition. Because the other problem is if you needed money for that bar class, you can't get student loans anymore because you're no longer a student. And many of you won't be able to get private loans either because you don't have an income. So we made the class part of your tuition. So every student that graduates from Vermont Law School gets that class. I don't want to say it's for free because you're paying for it in your tuition, but so that's just not a factor anymore. In addition, they provide a lot of support to us throughout your 3 years here. So the day that you get here, you'll get a password for Barbary, which will give you outlines, videos, supplemental study materials, practice questions that you can use in all of the classes that you take that are on the bar exam. So again, you can kind of really get a head start and not rely on that last 10 weeks to prepare. Instead, you can be preparing from the day that you get here.
Thank you. A little bit of a quiet group, but I do have one more question. A lot of these students are preparing to enter their 1L year. Is there any advice that you can offer of what they should be doing now? I got a question. Here we go.
Okay.
Forgive me if I missed any discussion on this earlier, but will the next generation of bar affect bar reciprocity at all? Like the UBE, how is that going to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, it will, because for a certain period of time, there are going to be two bar exams out there, the next generation bar exam and the current bar exam. And in terms of UBE score portability between the states, they're only going to be taking the next generation bar exam for that portability. So you still, for a state that hasn't adopted it yet, like New York, for example, you might still take the old bar exam, but it won't be portable to the other UBE states out there. And most states are UBE states. So there'll be a certain period of time where not all bar exam admissions will be portable. And that's an impact. Most states, each state has its own reciprocity rule. So if you don't do it through a UBE score transfer, you can do it after you've practiced for a certain amount of time. So like in Vermont, for example, I was licensed in Massachusetts, so I could get into the Vermont bar because I had practiced for more than 5 years. I still had to do a character and fitness and all sorts of other things, but I didn't have to take the exam again. And most states have a regulatory system that allows reciprocity around 5 years of practice. So that should still be available to you, but that UBE score portability is going to be harder depending on where you're trying to go to and from.
That reminds me of when UBE, when I started in law school admissions, UBE was only just like a few tiny states.
Yeah,
And then so students had to take a bar in New Jersey, a bar in New York, a bar in Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. So that'll maybe happen to you all. Sorry in advance. Some of my friends have taken 3 bars. They've moved here and here within, like, when they're trying to find their jobs. I think our alumni Stacy Shelton, she took Vermont and then Georgia.
right.
Yeah.
Well, our president, Rod Small, I was just talking about him. He took Delaware 5 years ago because he was the dean of a law school in Delaware and wanted to be able to practice law there. And Delaware does not have reciprocity, so he had to take the bar exam again. And so he has a great perspective on it, having taken it after being a practicing lawyer for so long and a leader of many academic institutions. And he talks about, I mean, imagine not passing as the dean of a law school. It's like an extra amount of pressure that he had on him, but fortunately he passed with flying colors.
And I believe he studied. He put in some major.
He studied 8 hours a day. He said his daughter had just graduated from law school as well and was taking the bar, so they sort of studied together, which is kind of fun.
Wow. So I'm going to here's another question. Has the NCBE provided a response to the concerns regarding the potential subjectivity of the exam answers? Additionally, have they provided any information regarding when they plan to release more practice questions so schools can prepare?
Yeah, they've promised some practice questions by the end of August, more practice questions and study materials by the end of August this summer. They have not responded to concerns about subjectivity and grading at all yet. So that's something we're still waiting to hear. That said, I mean, any standardized test goes through many rounds of testing to ensure that sort of fairness. So I do have some confidence that they will find a way. I think the bigger problem is going to be student perception about how things are tested. But it is true that it is a lot more subjective than a typical multiple choice test. You know, it is frustrating in some ways that they have provided so little information when I have students in this building right now that will be taking this new exam. But we have done the best we can with what we know to change our curriculum to help students prepare for it. So we've changed the first year curriculum quite a bit, actually. So that'll be the first. You guys next year will be incoming students in the fall will be the first ones that are taking our new first year curriculum, and then also change some of our bar preparation programming too to respond to these changes. Whether you come to Vermont Law School or not, I think it's an important question for you to be asking the schools that you want to go to. What are they doing to prepare students for the next generation bar exam? I think schools have had to be proactive and resourceful in changing their curriculums to respond to this new exam, given the limits in the information presented. And I will say that law schools are not known for being sort of proactive and resourceful in general, and legal education hasn't changed very much in many, many, many years. So I think it's an important question for you as a potential student anywhere to be asking about what your school is planning for the next gen bar preparation.
Do you know, because they're like the news isn't out about all the states, do you know when states is there any kind of requirements when states have to adopt the next?
No, there's no requirement except that the NCBE has said they will not be making the old exam after 2028. And I feel like few states want to get involved in writing their own bar exam. So if they're not going to write their own, they've got to use the NCBE bar exam. So that means they will have to do it by 2028, even if they haven't announced so, or write their own. So, you know, maybe you might get a state like New York that decides to write its own bar exam. California already does a lot of its own thing. But your smaller states in particular are probably not going to want to take that task on.
Thank you. I know some of our students are concerned about that, but I think you gave some great advice about both bars are hard. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, both bars are hard, but I would rather, if I'm choosing my hard, I would rather choose the difficulty of preparing something that's actually going to be useful for the practice of law. So despite the uncertainty, despite all of it, that's why I still favor the next gen bar based on what I know right now. I'm not trying to say that the old bar exam was useless. I mean, I think the exercise of focusing in a sustained, disciplined way for a long period of time is valuable for any professional. And the test to do that is the bar exam. And so I do feel like there is some benefit to it. But and issue spotting, there is always issue spotting on the old bar exam too. But if my students have to prepare for this exam and take this exam, then I want it to be as relevant as possible to what they're going to experience in practice.
Thank you. How do students deal with, like, if they want to practice in Illinois, but then they're taking the test in Missouri, allow them to practice in Illinois? I think it might be determining where each state is and being mindful of that.
Yeah, so if you want to practice full-time in a state, your best bet's to take the bar exam in that state. However, if both are UBE states, then you can do it that way. It's going to be a little extra expense, but you won't have to take the test again. So I think Illinois was one and Missouri?
Missouri, yeah.
So I believe those are both UBE states. And so you can take the exam in Illinois, and Missouri might have a higher score to pass it. And so as long as you get that score in Illinois, you can transfer that score to Missouri and get admitted in Missouri without taking the exam again. So for example, Vermont is 270 is our pass score in Vermont. It's a UBE state. New York is a UBE state right now too. It's 266. So if one of my students sits in Vermont and gets a 267, they've failed Vermont, but they can take that score and get into New York because they're above the 266 that they need for New York. And so it just works that way. The highest is 270, the lowest is 260. And so sometimes, sometimes it's helpful to be admitted to another bar, even if it's not where you're going to practice, because many federal jobs only require passage in any state. So if you got a 260 in Vermont, you don't have a high enough to pass Vermont, you don't have high enough to pass New York, but you could take that 260 to a state that you are high enough. There's a couple, Alabama, New Mexico. There's one other that's 260. Get admitted there. And then if you apply for a federal job, then you can, like I said, you only need to be admitted anywhere. And then some, many jobs that law school graduates take don't require a law degree to practice law. Of course, the degree is beneficial in other ways, right? Like my job here, I don't have to be admitted to practice law in order to be a professor at a law school. And so sometimes, you don't need to be admitted in a certain place. Another thing you can do is if you just want to practice for one or two cases in that other state, there's a process called pro hoc vice, where you can apply even without being licensed in the state to get licensed for a particular case. So that happened for us when I was practicing in Boston. If there were times where we had clients or cases in neighboring states, and we would apply pro hoc vice to be able to represent our clients in that state just for that case, as opposed to having a full admission.
Dean McCormick, sorry to interrupt you. The question that I had about practicing in Southern Illinois, that's where I reside. And I noticed that on the screen that you had put up earlier that Missouri is July of 2026 when they'll institute the next generation bar exam.
Yeah.
And if we're all going to be taking it approximately July of 28, would they then be doing still the UBE, or would we be doing the next generation bar exam at that point? Could I take the next generation bar exam in Missouri and get reciprocity into Illinois at that time, since Illinois was not listed?
So presumably Illinois will eventually adopt the next generation bar exam, and presumably that will be no later than 28, even if they haven't done it already. So I would take the next generation bar exam and hope that Illinois allows reciprocity. Otherwise, you could just wait until 28. Well, you'd be graduating. When are they graduating? 27. Right. So I would take the next generation bar exam, but each state makes their own decisions about reciprocity. But my guess is going to be that a next generation bar state will accept the next generation bar when it officially accepts it, if that makes sense. So I would not want you. Well, I mean, I suppose you could, if you graduate in 27, I suppose you could take the old exam in Illinois and get admitted in Illinois, but then I don't know that Missouri would take you You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? So it's going to depend state by state.
Okay, and so we're saying that the
Complicated.
next generation bar exam is going to be mandatory or allowed to be taken in all states at what date again? 2028?
July 2028, but
Okay.
states could choose to offer their own bar exam outside of the NCBE if they wanted.
Okay, thank you very much for
Yeah, you're
clarifying.
welcome.
I know, hot topic. Thank you, Travis. And thanks for asking that live. Dean McCormick, since we're, here's every time I'm gonna like, hey, one more question, and then a quick like what they should be doing before they start law school. Is there a reasonable expectation for a timeline regarding decisions from individual states regarding NextGen versus their own bar? Oh, that one, I guess they'd have to decide by 2028, right?
Yeah, but each state's Supreme Court makes the decision, and there's lots of constituencies that the Supreme Court's considering. So each state will probably speak with their bar associations, their law schools to see what the recommendation is. That's what happened in Vermont. The Vermont Supreme Court asked us, we're the only law school in Vermont, so they asked us, when do you think we should adopt the next generation bar exam? And we recommended July of 2027 because we thought being the first was too risky because we just don't know anything. And we thought if we were the second, then that would give us time to learn more about it before our students actually take it. So that's why we chose Vermont. I mean, that's why we chose July 2027. Each state's doing their own calculus about it. And you could check the local legal papers to see if there's been discussion and conversation about it. But I mean, the subject of my presentation is the biggest change to legal education that no one's talking about, because I am stunned how little information's been released and how little law schools are talking about this. Deans are not talking about this very much. I mean, of course, there's exceptions, and even state bars are not really talking about this, even though it is coming and it is big. It is a big departure. But you could check your local legal news to see if there's any information. The NCBE website also has a lot of information as well. So I know you asked me to talk to you, Katie, you wanted me to say what should you be doing now if you want to attend law school next year. So I truly believe that the most important skill in law school and as a lawyer is to be able to write and communicate clearly. Even though I teach civil procedure now, the most valuable class I took in law school was legal writing. Maybe that would be different if the next generation bar exam was in place then. But in your classes, in your exams, in your experiential work, you're going to need to to be able to communicate clearly. And legal writing is a special thing that you'll learn in legal writing 1 and 2. But good legal writing is really just good writing. So that's something that you can focus on in the next 6 months or so. Legal writing is a skill. So the more you practice it, the better you get. So sometimes students say, well, I'm just not a good writer. Well, you can improve. It's a skill, just like any other skill. And so some ways that you can do that is by reading good writing, right? Reading good writing can help you become a better writer. So I always suggest students the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist. Those are examples of good writing. The Atlantic, any Supreme Court brief. So those are all available for free. Go to the SCOTUS blog, and they have every case. They have the briefs that were written and submitted for the parties in the case for free, available to you online. Find a case that you're interested in, read the briefs on both sides, and take note of the way that they communicate in writing, because reading good writing can really improve your own writing. So that's one thing I would recommend. And then the other is, to the extent that you can, because law school is such an intense commitment and a full-time job, right? To the extent you can, to get everything else that you can taken care of so that you can truly focus on your studies. So decide where you want to go. Find an apartment, get everything set up that you can so that once you start, you can really, truly be focused on your studies. And attend sessions like this where you can learn more about the law school and the legal legal field as a whole. So I think all those would be really good things to do.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope to see many of you in my civil procedure class in the fall. But if not, I wish you the best of luck in your law school journey. And if I can be of help to you, please reach out to Katie, and she knows how to find me.
Yeah, thank you, Dean McCormick, and have a great weekend, everyone. If you're in this storm warning, I hope you settle in, Dean McCormick. I'm actually heading to my family's in San Francisco, trying to beat the storm out. So we'll see. All right, and I guess you'll be hitting the slopes, right?
Yes, I'm a big skier, everyone, so I love to ski, and I could not be more delighted with the snow. The snow that is coming. So it's really a carnival-like atmosphere around here.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Have a happy weekend and congratulations. And I'm super happy for all of you attending because I know you're going to pass the bar because actually you're already at one of these. All right.
I think so too.
Take care. Bye-bye.